Dr. Hill Gemara. Today is a beautiful, beautiful Gemara today. So we learned yesterday, the Yom Makra, Loi Sechanim, Loi Sitein Lahem Chaniya Bekarka. You're not allowed to give them even a foothold in the land, and that's shot in the Mishnah, why you cannot sell them a Chubala Karka. Because if they have any plant or tree that's mechubel karka, so they have a foothold in the land. That's why you have to cut that tree down, then you can give it to them. Lositin lohem chaniya bekar. Fragt the Gemara, how loy sechanim mi boyelei for a divin Allah. The hachi kamarachma lositin lohem chen. You shouldn't compliment and say, "Wow," as shaloyemar Rashi says, "Kama ovid kechavim zeno." Look at this beautiful statue. One is not allowed to say that. If that's all the Torah wanted to tell us, was you're not allowed to be in on and be complementary to the Avoda Zara. Let me call loy sechunam with a vav. My loy sechanem shemami notarti. We know both from there. Rashi says, what is loy sechunam? The kriyasei mali with the vav. The mashma loshen chanina v'huchein. Loy sechunam is really the precise way to say chen. Loy Sechanim is written without the vav because the Torah wants to signal to us that you're also not allowed to give them a foothold in the Eretz Yisrael. Correct Gemara, but there's another limit from this pasuk. You're not allowed to give a goy anything for free. You're not allowed to give them anything for free, and that we learn from Loy Sachinem. With a yud, as if they had a yud, miloshen chinam. Zok to Gemara, that's also true. You learn that third thing from the pasuk as well, because in Cain, if the Torah was only satisfying not to give them chen and not to give them a chaniya, lemerkor loisechinam, my loisechonim shemami nakulu. That's how we know everything. So if it only meant you can't give them something chinam, but it was said loisechinam. Since it's loisechonim, which is a little bit of a vague lashon because it doesn't have the vav for the mole and the yud for chinam, we learn all three things from it. So now we have three important halachas. A, you're not allowed to make a very complimentary statement regarding an Avoda Zara, how beautiful it is. You're not allowed to give them a foothold in your land, which is why this is the gay in our sugya. And you're also not allowed to give them a gift. You're not allowed to give a goy a gift. Now we're going to have to get more details as to what does it mean you can't give a goy a gift. But we will see that soon. Tanya nami hachi loy sechanem loy sitin lahem chaniya bekarka. Don't give them a foothold in your karka. Dovaracha loy sechanem loy sitin lahem chen. Don't give them chen. Don't talk about how great they are. And dovaracha loy sechanem loy sitin lahem matnas chinam. So we have a brisa that in one place extracts all these three halachas from this pasuk. Frek the Gemara, zok the Gemara, matnas chinam gufa tanai. This third item that we said, one may not give a gift to a guy, that in and of itself is not so poshut. That's actually the subject of a machlokes tonight. The time we learned, loy soichlu kol nevela. This is a fascinating pasuk. Loy soichlu kol nevela. One may not eat a nevela. So what should one do with the nevela? Lager asher b'sharecha titnena v'achla. You should either give it to a ger in your community and let him eat it. Titnana means as a gift. Or the other option is mechar l'nakri, sell it to a guy. Zok to Gemara, zok to Brisa. Ainli ella lager b'nesina ula'ovid kechavim b'mechir. From the pashas that are reading of the pasuk, I would say that you could either gift it to a ger or sell it to a guy. But lager b'mechira minayin. How do you know you're also allowed to sell it to a ger? So when you read a pasuk, the way you should read it is like soichlu kol nevela lager asher b'sharecha titnena va'achla oy mechar. Period. So the oy mechar is also referencing back to the ger. Okay. La'ovid kechavim b'nesina minayin. How do you know if you don't want to sell it to the guy, you want to gift it to the guy? How do you know that you're allowed to do that? Talmud Leimer. You take both things and you apply it to the later item, to the nachri. Nimtza toimer. So the sum total of all this information is echad ger ve'echad ovid kechavim bein b'nesina bein b'mechira divrei Reb Meir. According to Reb Meir, you're allowed to gift or sell to a ger or to a goy. So clearly, Reb Meir holds you're allowed to gift something to a goy. So this shiloh that we said lo sechinam, you shouldn't give them anything for free. Clearly, Reb Meir disagrees because Reb Meir holds you're allowed to give them an avela for free. But Reb Yehuda, it's dvarim kiksavim. You may do only specifically what the Torah lists off, and that is lager b'nisina. A ger you're allowed to gift it to. Ula'ovid kechavim b'mechira. But to a goy you may not gift it, you only may sell it. Zok the Gemara, but Shapir Kamer Reb Meir. Reb Meir does have a good point. You could read it both ways. Zok the Gemara of Reb Yehuda Amar Loch, Isol Kedaitach Kedekamer Reb Meir. If it really means to include Nesina to a goy and Mechira to a ger, you know how the pasuk should have expressed it without the oy. The oy is a hard separation. Torah should have just said, Lichter Rechmanet Titnenev Achla Umechar. So going back to the pasuk, Lasoich L'Kol Neveda Lager Shebeshrecha Titnenev Achla Umechar L'Lechri. That oy clearly makes a separation. Oy Lamali. Zok Gemara, obviously L'Dvarim Kikshav Muda, which is how Rabbi Yehuda understands the pasuk. For Meir, it's a hu lakdumi nisina the ger lemechira David b'chol. For Meir, you could do both. So why is there an oy? Is to tell you that the best thing to do with it is to gift it to a ger. If you have a choice between gifting it to a ger or selling it to a goy, better gift it to the ger. As Rashi says, don't sell it to a goy for a profit if you could gift it to a ger. That is the plan A. Oh, if you can't, then Moicha lo v'kechol. For Rabbi Yehuda, even the ger ata matzul lach Yosy. I don't need an oy to tell me that. We know that you're mechuyev to be mechazik a ger that lives amongst you. Ukanani iyat matzul lach Yosy. So it's pashut that if you have it and you can gift it to the ger, you have to first, because you have a responsibility to help the ger, and therefore lahaktim lo tzarich kra. I don't need a pasuk for that. So the oy is to tell me that the zvar kicks off him. You're only allowed to gift it to a ger, and you're only allowed to sell it to a guy. Okay, so this requires some extra information. So Tosfos here discusses the psukim of Leisachanin. Are they going on all goyim, or are they only going on the Eretz Shiva Amamin? So Tosfos ends up concluding that Avoda they would apply to all goyim. So the place where it makes a difference is there's a pasuk that's like sichrois bris. Don't make a peace treaty with goyim, and we know that they were goyim that were not from the Shiva Amamin that they did make a peace treaty with. As Rashi points out that there's also the concept of marriage. Shiva Amamin, even if they become gerim, they're not a married Klaisel, but the others are allowed to. So he quotes a story where they did do a peace treaty with a certain nation. Let me see if I can find it. Here we talk about Tzitz Kedushin.
Wasn't that the Givinim?
I believe that's what it was. The only people that are Ashalav Bakal are Ammonim, Moavim, and Mitri, Ammonim, Avi. But about the Shechinah and the Sinus Chain, there's no reason why you should even be able to non Eretz Amim. Oh, here it is. Increases bris. Gavi Shloima and Chira Melech Tzur. Shloima Melech made a peace treaty with Melech Tzur. I don't know what nation that is. It's Tzur, Syria.
Tyre.
That's Syria, no?
Tyre is Lebanon, northern.
So you see, so you have a raya that you could do a krisis bris with a nation that's not from the Shiva Sa'aman.
Actually, it's southern Lebanon. I don't know if it's within the
is it
borders.
North or south of the Latani River?
What?
Is it north or south of the Latani River?
I can't remember. Can't remember.
So he says, so Tosfos says that's a krisis bris, it's only to Eretz Sheva Amamin, and Lois Eschatn, of course, is only Sheva Amamin, and the Lois Echonim would apply to all goyim. Okay, let's have a quick look over here. Let's look at some of the details of Tosfos, because there's a lot of interesting questions that come up with giving a gift to a guy and or selling to a guy. So if you die dvarim kiksavim, meaning you may only gift it to a ger, you may only sell it to a guy. So the problem
when
is
we say ger, are we talking about a ger Taishiv
yes,
that lives in Eretz Yisrael?
Yes,
and is not Oived Avoda Zara.
Of course. Like otherwise, what are you giving him an avela for? So it has to be a ger Toshav who's only makabel not to do Avodah Zara, but avada he's eats avelas.
Right.
So Rabbi Yehuda dvarim kiksavim. So if Rabbi Yehuda dvarim kiksavim, so mineu bay for the pasuk, you see you're only allowed to sell it to a guy. So I was afraid to us, why do I need Leisachanim to tell me that I can't sell it to a guy? I know that I can't sell it to a guy because the Torah says so Taimel Rabbi Yehuda, Laman Leisachanim, Leisan Matnaschinam, but Tebek Lemehafa. You're only allowed to sell the novela to a guy. V'yeshleimer, the Leisachanim Istrich Litain Boilav. If it would just say I'm a Chayil Nachri, that would be a mitzvah to say to sell to a guy and not to give him. But how do we know there's a lav to actually do that? The lav is Leisachanim. Okay. So Tosh then asks a kasha that you see over here. Rabbi Yehuda seems to outlaw amat aschinam, yet in other places it says you're allowed to. So Tosh has to make some distinctions. So one of the things that Tosh says, and this is where it comes into play here, is because we sell to goyim all the time. How do we do that? Or we give to goyim. We give to goyim. So zok to Tosfos, it's when you see Rabbi Yehuda lets you gift to a guy, is ba'ovid kechavim hamakiroi mutter. If it's a friend of yours, you know him, you have an interaction with him, then it's mutter to gift to him. You know why? Because you're going to be benefiting from him. If you have a relationship with a guy, so you do things for him, he does things for you. That's not called leisachanim. That's not some giving them a gift. If you have a relationship with him, when you give him something, you're going to get something back from him because you have that type of relationship, and therefore it would be allowed. Okay. Then Tosfos asks, you have places where there were two strangers and the Yid gave a guy a gift. The Tosfos there, they were traveling together. When you're traveling together, automatically you're somewhat reliant on each other. Therefore, it's also not for free. Then Tosfos, correct Tosfos, isn't there a halacha that mefarnisim we know that you're allowed to give tzedakah to a goy. That's chinam. So the Tosfos Dakei Shalom is not chinam at all. The Dakei Shalom means not as chinam. It's Dakei Shalom, so that we should get along. That's not called chinam. Okay. So then Tosfos asks, what about Roye Bakar? And the Gemara says that we just learned it like a couple of days ago. Which means you're not supposed to kill them, but you're not allowed to help them either. So the Yeshloim the Kramairi she'enoi mechaya ba'isa matana. Ki af im lo'itin leklum lo yamas. So where are you allowed to give them? That's only if if he's going to die, then you're allowed to give him, because it says if he's going to die, you don't have to give him because it's loy ma'ilin. You don't help him. That's not called a mataschin. Okay. Zok to Gemara, Zok Tosfos weiter. If you have a choice of giving a gift away for free to a ger or to sell it and make money for yourself to a guy, you have to give it away. If you have something to sell, you're mechuyev to give it away for free to a ger, and you're not allowed to sell it. What's the justice for that? There's no mitzvah to gift something to a yid if you could sell it to a guy. I'll put up my house for sale, and the yid will say, I'm Jewish, you have to give it to me. That's not logical. So what is the swerve that you have to gift something to a ger before you could sell it? A nevela is worth very little to a Yisrael. They didn't live amongst goyim where you could just sell it to a goy. If you had an avela, they didn't even have refrigeration in those days. So the value of an Aveda was very little. Something simple like that has very little value. Yes, there would be a mitzvah to gift it to a ger first. Well, a ger yishav harbek yishar boser. But of course, something of value, something that's much easier to market, Avoda you have no chiyuv to give it away. Okay, gewaltig. Gesagt the Gemara weiter. Don't say complimentary things about him. Messiah le Rav. This is a right to Rav's halacha. The Yom Rav also lo adam sheyomer kama noe oivedes kachavim zu. He's not talking about a getchke. He's talking about a woman. Look at that beautiful. Wow! Look at that beautiful woman. Try saying that. You're not allowed to do that. Meisvei. Now, this is if you're married and your wife is with you and you say you end up in the doghouse for a week. So sometimes they have to be afraid. But it's like you're not allowed to give them and compliment them. And that doesn't even mean complimenting her to her face to start up with her. It even means just commenting to your friend how beautiful she is. These are stories that are, again, are beyond, they're way out of our scope. We have to go back to Mhem Kamar Lochim, Anu Kivli Adam, Mhem Kivli Adam, Anu Kachamayim. Meisei Reb Shimon Gamliel, Shahaya Al Gabe Maila Baharabayis. He was up high on the Harabayis. V'ra, and he saw Oivedes Kechavim Achas Nabi Yoser. He saw an extremely beautiful Goyish woman. Omar, he said, Morabu Maasech Hashem. He complimented on her beauty. So you see clearly, not like Rav. You see, he did say, Kamano Avedis Kechavimzu. The Mefarshim asked, why does it say that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was Al Gabi Maila Baharabayis? We know the staircases in Harabayis weren't straight. You went down, there was a landing, then you turned, you went more down. So we'll see on Tanam Aleph, you're not allowed to be looking at a woman, you have to look down. So clearly Reb Shimon ben Gamliel wasn't looking around. But what happened is when you're going down the stairs and then you have to turn 90 degrees because of a landing, you don't know there's something there in front of you. So when you turn, you could come face to face with somebody for a moment, even though you're guarding your eyes. And that's why this happened, because Rabbi Shimon Gamliel was on the turn on the step on the landing, and that's how he suddenly bumped into her and saw her, and they commented. V'af Rabbi Kiva ra Eishes Turnus Rupus Harasha. Now Rabbi Kiva used to have many debates with Turnus Rupus Harasha. And he would always win the debates. And he would always one up Turnus Rufus. And Turnus Rufus happened to have been married to a beautiful woman. And one day Rabbi Kiva saw her. Now Rabbi Kiva, how did he see her? Well, if he was close with Turnus Rufus or Russia, so he would often come into contact with Mrs. Turnus Rufus because she would ask him questions, and out of respect, he had to look at her. If a Malka comes and speaks to you, you have to have respect and look at her. That's why Rabbi Kiva looked at her. And you know what he did? He did something very strange when he first met this woman. And what did he do? First thing, he spit on the floor. And Rabbi Kiva was not on the Lavacher, right? And then Sochak, he laughed. And then Ubacha, he laughed. And it's brought down in another context, in a different Gemara, the Mesivta brings down, it relates the story a little bit different, and it says that Turnus Rupus asked him, why are you doing these three things? So he only explained at that point, in that Gemara, only two of the things, but he didn't explain why he laughed. And in a moment, we'll know why he didn't explain to Turnus Rupus why he laughed. Rok is Shahoisa Ba Mitipas Rucha. He wanted to say this lady, like any human being, comes from a tripas rucha which somewhat resembles saliva. So first he wanted to just calm everything down. At the end of the day, she's the same tripas rucha like everybody else. Yeah. We didn't even get to anything about my second one. Who talked to you? You're jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead. What? What? I didn't say that. You must have read that. But the Gemara is going to say in a moment. Yeah, he must have had more than one wife. Yeah. Sochak, he laughed. The Asida, the Megaira, because she eventually would become a Giyaris, Vinosavla, and he was going to be marrying her. Kiva knew that he was going to marry her. He wasn't exactly going to tell that to the strippers. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be marrying your wife one day, right? And Bacha, he cried because she was eventually going to die and be buried like everybody else. The Hashufra Bali Afra. Imagine such a beautiful, beautiful woman. She should just become Soyev Avoyu because she'll die and be buried and disintegrate like everything else. So the problem is, Rav said it's usher to do that. Usher la'adam sheyomer kamana avedish kachab masu. So how will Rav interpret what Rabbi Kiva did? How will Rav interpret what Rabbi Shimon did? He wasn't complimenting them, saying how great they are. He was telling Rabbi Yishloim, look at the beautiful creation that you created. The Amar Haraya B'riyas Toivos. If you see beautiful creations, Omer, you say Baruch Shekacha Bara Ba'ilamo. Gebenches the Rebbeinu Shalom who created such beautiful creations. What type of beautiful creation would one make such a bracha upon? Zok Tahelig Toisvis. B'Yerushalmi Omer Afilu Gomel Na Sus Na Tamar Na Omer Baruch Shekacha Loi Ba'ilamo. See a beautiful creation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made. I remember one day in Philadelphia Yeshiva, a boy's parents came to pick him up in a stretch limo. And we were little 16-year-old kids. We were so excited, a stretch limo. So everybody jumped to the window to see this gorgeous stretch limo. So I remember Rabbi Leib Tab said, Ich weiß nicht, was ihr guckt dort. Dieselbe GM, was kann machen eine Karre mit 2 Tieren, kann machen eine Karre mit 3 Tieren. Was ist das? Das ist gar nicht noch ein Stück Eisen. Ihr wollt wissen, was ist schön? Ein schönes Pferd. Wenn man sieht, ein schönes Pferd, das ist eine schöne Sache, was der Ewig euch haben. Wenn man sieht, ein schönes Kuh oder ein schöner Esel, oh, guck, was der Ewig euch schaffen. Aber ein Stück Eisen, ich weiß es kein Schenkheit. I don't know. So that was what my Rebbe told us. I had to recalibrate a little bit. Zog to Gemara. A guy could have got into trouble. Said, the Rebbe, uns gucken nicht auf the limousine. Uns gucken auf was da rauskommen von der Limousine. Okay. Zog to Gemara weiter. Fragt the Gemara. Was it mutter for Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel to look at these beautiful women? It says when the shmartim be called over, you have to be very careful from things that are not good. A person may not look at a beautiful woman, even though she's a pnuya, so she's muteres. Or, I love this one, you shouldn't look at a married woman, even if she's ugly. Imagine say a guy tells a pnuya, I'm only looking at you because you're ugly. If you're a nation sister, I wouldn't be able to look at you even though you're ugly. But you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to do that. Zok to Gemara on the base. You're not even allowed to look at if a woman has a particularly beautiful, striking outfit. You're not even allowed to look at the outfit on the hanger. Zok Rashi, why not? Because when he looks at this beautiful dress, he will envision and remember that he saw that woman in that dress. And vice the dress will rate him on. Because the dress makes somebody look beautiful. So you're not even allowed to do that. You're also not allowed to look at if they're mating. You're not allowed to look at even animals when they're mating. So it would be also. I remember there was a Yid in Lakewood in my days. He was an old man, and he had lost his mind because the Nazis had shot his kala under his chuppah. So he was like a hobo who lives in yeshiva. And there was once a cat giving birth in between the besmerish and the dining room. So somebody asked him, Moshe Abba, make hicken? He says, "Hawast nicht, steht doch im Verkaufes, Chochem, Haraya as an island." But the Gemara says here, you're not allowed to do that. Zok to Gemara, Vafilu, this is a very interesting line in the Gemara. Vafilu mole einayim kemalach hamoves, even if you're full of eyes like the malach hamoves, we'll have to see what that means. Still, Amru olav al malach hamoves shakuloi mole einayim, that the malach hamoves is full of eyes. So even if you're full of eyes, meaning Rashi said, meaning even if it's so difficult to close your eyes because you see her so clearly, you still have to look away. You still have to look away. B'shas pitirosei shel choila, when a choila is about to die, oimed me'al mirashosav, the malach hamava stands by the head of the bed, v'charbo shlufa b'yodai, and the malach has his sword stretched out. V'tipa shel mora tluyaboy, there's some type of bitter liquid at the tip of his sword. Kiven shechoila roya isai, when the choila sees the malach hamavas, he becomes very afraid. Mizdazeya, and that fear causes the nifter or the choila upaiseach pit, opens his mouth. V'zarka l'soich pit, and that drop of mora, whatever it is, that poison goes into the mouth of the choila. Mimena mace, that causes the mace to die. Mimena masriach, that causes the mace to deteriorate and decompose and smell. And mimena hanav moirikos, and that makes his face green. So how is it possible that they would look? How could you say Rabbi Kiva looked? How could you say Rabbi Shimon Gamliel looked? It's also to look. But the more Karen Zavis Havoi, like I mentioned earlier, that they were coming around the corner and she popped up on them. But if they were seen her coming from a distance, they would of course had time to look away and not to focus on her beauty. So there's a lot of talk about this Malach HaMavis. Now, a Malach HaMavis is a Malach, so you can't possibly say that he's made out of eyes. He's a Malach. So there are those who learn that there's a lot of scary information on here. That every time a person is nichshol and he looks at somebody that he's not supposed to look at, it says in Tefillah Zaka that we are create something called nigei b'nei adam. We talk about it in Tefillah Zaka, that we create nigei b'nei adam. Nigei b'nei adam are these eyes. Every time someone looks at something he's not supposed to look at, there's like an eye there on the Malach HaMavis. Again, this is way above our pay grade. I don't know exactly what these things are. But the Mefarshim say that what does it mean eyes is right before someone's death, when the Malach HaMavis is coming to get his neshama, it becomes the Malach HaMavis reveals to him why this person is deserving death. And he reveals to him his averis that he did through his lifetime, that for that he's deserving death. So that's what it means eyes. Eyes means you could see it clearly. You'll be able to see, a person will have to come face to face with all of his deeds and misdeeds at the time of his death. And that's what it means, full of eyes, because everything is clear as day that can be seen. Okay, so Zok to Gemara weiter. V'loi bevigdei teva shalisha. V'loi bevigdei teva shalisha. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, afilu shetuchin al gabe koisel. And we're not only saying that it's also to look at bigdei teva shalisha while she's wearing them, even if they're hung up, that they have to be spread. If they're folded up, then there wouldn't be a problem. But if they're open up, that they're on a hanger, and you see the full beged, that will trigger these thoughts. Amar Papa also v'makar b'leiad. That also is only if you know who is wearing this dress. If you don't recognize this dress, then there is no such halacha. You'd be allowed to look at the dress because the whole point is that it's triggering your memory of the woman that was wearing it. And the Chanam, so we're obviously talking about no, but we're obviously talking about something that's striking that you would have noticed, right? We're not talking about just any old dress. It's talking about something that was so unique that it stands out, and through that you would remember the person that was wearing this dress. Amar Rava Dekanami, the Katani v'loy bevigdei tzeva. V'loy bevigdei tzeva isha, which is lashon singular. Shel isha. Doesn't say you're not allowed to look at a beautiful flashy dress. You're not allowed to look at a specific beautiful flashy dress, a beautiful flashy dress that you noticed a woman wearing. So there you wouldn't be able to look at that flashy dress even when she wasn't wearing it, because it's going to remind you of her. Shmamina. Omar B'chista. Hana mili be'atiki. Of course, the type of dress that we're talking about is a dress that she had worn once before, so you will be reminded of her and how she looked in that specific dress. If she bought a brand new dress that she never wore yet, that's a dress you're allowed to look at because you don't have that. It doesn't trigger that memory of her wearing that dress. And I'll prove it to you, Zokar B'chista. The Loite Mahachi, when you used to get a dress, I guess it didn't come perfect. It always needed some type of modification, some type of hemming or whatever. So you would always take it in to the dry cleaner because the dry cleaner usually has a tailor there on site. It must have been that way in those days too. Because if you don't say that, anan mana li ashpure heichi yavinun, how could we ever give our beged to do some hemming on it, to do some what's it called, some alterations on it? How would we ever be able to do that? Hakamistakel, the tailor is looking at this fancy dress, right? Obviously, that's not a problem because it's a new dress and it's not linked to a memory as of a woman wearing that dress. What does Lashpur say? Koives, a washer, hamasakin b'len chadoshim. So you see, it's not a new thing that nowadays often dry cleaners employ a tailor to do alterations. It was like that in the olden days too. You know why? Because in the olden days, they also lost buttons. So they had to sew them back on. According to what you're saying, that you're not allowed to look at things that are inappropriate, and as we said, you're not allowed to look at animals when they're mating. What if you have a horse and you have a lady horse and you want to breed them? As an owner, you're allowed to breed them. You're literally allowed to take the aver of your horse and insert it in to the makam and the keva to breed them. You're allowed to do that. That's looking. You're not supposed to look. When a guy is mating his animals because he's in the business, he's got to do this, right? He has no time to think about other things. He's busy focusing on the task at hand. So too, whenever you're doing something that you're like, for instance, like a dry cleaner, where he's there to wash the dress, he's not there to start thinking about who knows what it's going to remember of, what it's going to remind him of. There's not a problem. So therefore, liboy al malachta v'shechayach eher, and that is the heter why women could go to men doctors, because the men they have a job to do. They're busy working. They don't right now is not a time where their minds are going to be going into a wrong direction. There's a concept of bavidite tarid. Right now, again, Rabbi Loy holds you're not allowed to ever shake hands with a woman. But Bavidite Torah is also, if someone's in the middle of a big business deal and they have to shake, there's a svara to say this is not a time for those moshavas. He's worried about the deal. So this svara is used by poskim to be matter certain things that could possibly be a problem. Of course, you always have to consult with a local Orthodox rabbi. Zog to Gemara. Amar Mar, let's drill down to get more information on this malach hamas. So the little drop that drops into the mouth of the chayla, mimena meis. That's what causes the death of a person. For the Gemara, that means the person dies from like poisoning, so to speak. Oh, that's the Gemara's kasha. Name of pliga Avoda Shmuel. It must be that he argues on Shmuel, on the father of Shmuel. The Amar Avoda Shmuel, Omar li malach hamavis. The malach hamavis once told me they had a relationship, right? You got to keep your friends closer and your enemies closer. So he had a buddy, the Malach HaMavis, and he said, if I wasn't concerned about covered abrius, about people not being left in the not nice situation, have a parana base hashchita kebehema. I would open up the place where I shech them like a behema, and you'd see the open raw wound. That's how I would present it. So you see clearly that the way the person is killed is by a sword chopping off his head. So Gemara, who said it was a sword that cut it? Maybe this drop was like an acid that severs the head. Now, I don't know exactly what this means. This is above my pay grade because not every mace you see their head falls off. So I'm not sure exactly what this means. So that causes the body to start disintegrating and to smell. The bad smell that comes from a mace emanates from its mouth. The Amar, the Misayel Reb Chanina Bakana, the Amar Reb Chanina Bakana, Amri Beirav, Haroichu Shalo Yasriach Meisai. If someone wants that his mace shouldn't die, Yapchenu Alpanav, turn it over on its face, So I said smell because,
Oh, you said die.
oh, I said die?
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
I'm sorry.
Make sure the mace doesn't die.
Oh, I apologize. They shouldn't smell. Now, before I should explain, this doesn't stop it from rotting, but this at least stops the smell from coming out because it's face down. Talk more about it. Tanu Rabbana. V'nishmarta mikol davara. Person needs to be careful from any bad things. Shelo yahar adam b'yoyim v'yavai l'dei tuma b'layla, which will lead to him becoming tama at night. Mikan amar Pinchas ben Yair. This is the famous brisa that the Mesilas Yesharim is based on. It's a step-by-step guide to come to the highest madregas. Amar Pinchas ben Yair. Torah mavia l'dei zehiros. Now, in the 1900s, when Russia opened up a little bit, at the end of the 1900s, at the end of the 20th century, when Russia opened up, they uncovered a lot of svarim that they didn't have access to because the Russians had locked them up. And they found an earlier edition of the Mesilas Yesharim. Moshe Chaim Luzzatto wrote the Mesilas Yesharim that we're all familiar with, that we learned, but there's actually an earlier edition of it that he finished 5 years earlier. This was in the 1700s, so it was printed, and it was not the one that was given out to the crowd. And Dr. Henry Abington writes that he knows a professor who did his doctoral thesis on why the Mesilas Yesharim that we have is the one that we use and not that one. And he says, I believe he quotes the Mesilas Yesharim in his Akdama, I didn't see this inside, says that the first version was censored out by his own printers. They felt it was too radical. So they said, no, this is not fit for the consumption of the masses. You have to tame it down a little bit. So Henry Abington said you could find this original Mesilas Yesharim today. It's readily available. It's called the Mesilas Yesharim HaSholem. And he says it's a very very interesting sefer. It's a very interesting sefer, but it's all based on this price, on charting a path to godless. If one learns Torah, he will come to Zehiros. Zehiros in its simplest form means if you're faced with an Aveira, it's a tremendous care to avoid an Aveira that is available to be done. Zehiros Mavil is Zrizus. Zrizus is already proactive. It's thinking, what might I encounter that could cause me to sin? Let me avoid the situation before we even get close to it. As Rashi Zarus v'nishbar koydem lachein. Someone who's proactive, shalatavi aveira liyada. Kihacha, that will be an example. Zrizus is an example of Eini mahar lo voiludei tumah. The issue is the tumah, but Zrizus says don't even be mahar b'yoim, so it avoid the whole situation to be able. Zrizus mavil the nikinos. Nikinos means naki be'ein chet. If someone is so proactive, not even to get into a situation that could lead to chet, that will lead to a certain high level of nikios. Nikios mavil the precious. If someone is very careful to avoid any slight stain of chet, he'll often stay away from things that are mutter to him. He'll make himself gedorim with things that are mutter to him to be very far away from chet. Precious revealed the tahira, that leads to purity. That's even not higher madrega than the kiyos. And tahira is revealed the chasidus. Tahira brings to chasidus. So chasidus is even greater than tahira. Chasidus is doing lefnumi shursadin, anticipating what it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants even before HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us. Chasidus revealed the anova, that brings to humility. Anova revealed the yiras chet. Yiras chet revealed the kedusha. This is like way out of my pay grade. I mean, I should have said that as soon as we started with the first thing. For Torah revealed his ears, that's way out of my pay grade, and that's it. Not a rest. I don't have to speak it out. Kedusha revealed the Ruach Hakodesh. Ruach Hakodesh revealed the Tchias HaMeisim. So that is the order of the climb. Frank Gemara, are you telling me for Chasidus Gedola Mikulon? Based on your list, Chasidus must be bigger than Tahira and bigger than Precious and bigger than the Kiyos. Is that true? The Chasidus Gedola Mikulon? I'm sorry, it's saying it towards the Chuzah. Chasidus is greater than now. Shenemar Oz Dibarta B'Chazoin. Who I think there's a Yeshai Novi saying, who did you speak to? Who did the Rebbe Shalom speak to? No, it's Dovid HaMelech. Who did the Rebbe speak to in the Nevuah? Lachasidecha. So you see, the mother Chasidus is greater than everything else, and that's what never liyerecha ulanavecha. It's all Chasidus. So Chasidus is greater than them all. Oh, it's even greater than Anova. So even though Chasidus is in the line before Anova, before Yerushalayim, but Chasidus is what brings to Nevuah. Upliga de Rabbi Shua ben Levi, he argues with Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Anova is Gedolah B'chula. Anova is the greatest. Shenemar, you know who Hashem talks to? Ruach Hashem Elokim Alayan Moshach Hashem Oisi Levaser Anovim. Chasidim Loinemar Ela Anovim. So you see, the Nevuah goes to Anovim Halamakta Shanova Gedolah B'chula. Let's read the pasuk inside. It says Ruach Hashem Alai. Aloy on me, Yon. Maybe Hashem spoke to me, answered me, or Moshach Hashem Oisi. Hashem was anointed me levaser anovim shalachani to say information to anovim. So you see, Hakadosh Baruch Hu's nevuah is focused on anovim, so that's the greatest of them all. Zok to Gemara weiter. Ein moichin. Now we'll get back into the halachas of Avoda Zara. You're not allowed to sell them mechubel lekar. Tanu Rabbanan moichin lohen ilan al manas lokutz the kodesh to Rabbi Yehuda. You don't have to cut it down before you sell it. You could sell it first and let them know that you're going to cut it down after it's sold to them, and then you could give it to them and cut it. Like, for instance, in the nursery, you go pick a tree that's growing, planted there in the ground by the nursery. After you buy it and pay for it, then they cut it for you and they wrap it up. You're not allowed to even complete the sale before the tree is cut down. This is a tree. What about shachas? Shachas Rashi describes as tavuas chitin usoirin kodim shetamale, like straw, not fully grown wheat. So if they want to buy straw from you, same thing. Almanas ligzois, you could sell it to them while it's connected to the ground, but you tell them, I'm going to be cutting it for you. The goizes, the Rabbi Yehuda. The same thing. Ela ein moichin ela gezuza. Comma. What about full wheat?
Say buying the transaction.
Rabbi Yehuda holds before the transaction happens, it has to be cut. Rabbi Meir holds it could be cut after, as long as that's the deal, that it will be cut. You can't finish the sale. Discussing the sale is something else. Yeah. Kama is fully grown wheat or barley or any grain. Almanas lixar v'koitzer de Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi ein moichin l'ksura. Now we have three halachas that are pretty much identical. Why did we need to hear Rabbi Meir's shita and Rabbi Yehuda's shita in each of these three halachas? So tricha, the Yashmin and Elon. If we would only know by Elon, but how come Rabbi Meir? That's where Rabbi Meir says that it's that ein moichin l'ksura. You have to cut it down first. Why? Kivan le'pasit. There's no damage to a tree by letting it stay in the ground longer. So there's no incentive for the guy that's buying it from you to cut it. He doesn't mind if it stays in your ground. Mashale, it might be left. Aval high, but shachas, the chimashali, aval high, the chimashali posid, it goes bad. If grain stays into the ground too long, it's going to go bad. Inside the shachas, inside the grain. So, maybe that you could let him cut it after he buys it. Why? Because you know he's going to cut it. He doesn't want it to go bad. If we only know these two things, because you can't see how it's benefiting by remaining planted in. So the tree, you don't see it get better every moment. You know, a tree to grow, it takes a long time till you see the tree mature. Same thing is with wheat that goes bad. You can't see that it's getting better because it's actually getting worse if you leave it there too long. Avol shachas, the yadish v'chayu, that you'll actually can see very quickly every moment that it stays in the ground. You see it's benefiting. Maybe even there, Rabbi Yehuda would hold that you have to cut it first because the guy might leave it there too long. So therefore, we needed Rabbi Yehuda shita by shachas. Maybe Rabbi Meir said by shachas, where there's a strong incentive for the guy to keep it there. That's where you have to cut it first. The Yidish v'chayim, but maybe by a tree or by wheat, where there's an incentive to cut it maybe Moedel Rabbi Yehuda, maybe Rabbi Meir would say, yes, you could cut it later. Tzricha, so that's why we need the Bachloikis having been told to us in all cases to cover all the bases. Iboilu. What about Behema Almanas Lishchoit Mahu? Are you allowed to sell a Goya Behema Almanas Lishchoit? So right away we have a question. Didn't we just say a couple of days ago someone sold a Goya animal? I think it was Rafuna, and there was a time on him. He says, "What do you mean? I'm not selling it to work. I'm selling it to Shecht." And by default, you can assume that he's selling it to Shecht. So Zok to Gemara, that would only be I believe we're talking about a para. But what about animals that you don't normally Shecht? That's where everybody agrees you're not allowed to sell to a guy. But here you spoke out that he will Shecht it. Would it be allowed? So Behema Amnas Lishchoit Vishoichet, and he Shechts it. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. I'm sorry, I skipped. The reason why Rabbi Yehuda allowed him to cut it later is because the guy is not in control of it. It's in his property, right? The tree that he's buying is in the property they eat. So I'm in control. It's my property. Get it out of here. And therefore, I have control over, and the guy won't be able to violate and keep it there connected to the ground. Once I give a behema over, I don't have control anymore of if the guy will shecht it. What if I tell the guy, yes, you're buying it to shecht, and the guy changes his mind? You're powerless to do anything. Given the we're afraid he'll let it stay alive, and that's where there's a problem with mechira. Tashma, we have a chloride, that's not a problem. The Tanya behema almanas polishchoit, the sheichet divrei Rabbi Yehuda, so you see he allows it, so there's no issue. Okay, let's just finish this next line because I have to finish the Amud. It's a long Mishnah. We'll just look at the first line of the Mishnah. Ein maskir lembatim be'Eretz Yisrael. You're not allowed to rent a home to a goy in Eretz Yisrael. The in tzarich loimer sados. Surely you're not allowed to rent them sados. The Gemara is going to explain sados are worse because not only are you giving them a foothold in Eretz Yisrael, if they own a sada, it'll be part of a maisrus. So you're also causing a diminishing of the maisrus. Ubasuria, which was added later on to Eretz Yisrael by David, but it's not considered Eretz Yisrael midaraisa, so there it doesn't have such strict rules. Maskir and lambatim, you're allowed to rent them houses of Eloi Sados, because Sados has an additional problem of being mafkiah and maishras. We'll stop here, Bez Hashem. We'll continue tomorrow. Tomorrow I will not be here in person, so for tomorrow morning and for which is Wednesday, and for Thursday morning I will say only on Zoom. And Bez Hashem, Friday morning I'm hoping to be here for sheer. If not, I'll say from the way, but hopefully I will be able to be back. Everyone should have an awesome day.
Go ahead.